My name is Christabel, and I'm the creator of Breath of Bliss Academy. I'm based in Bali, and I'm so absolutely honored to be here at the IVF conference to share with you. Let's all take a couple deep breaths just to drop in because there's more coming in. So I invite you to open your mouth, breathe deep and let it go. 2 more breaths. Feeling your whole body. And the last breath, make a sound on the exhale. Beautiful. So, how many of you are interested in creating a global awakening with breathwork? Okay. And how many of you are excited about creating collaborations with experts in other fields to get the word out there? Okay. And last question, how many of you might feel a little intimidated by technology or learning new jargon or video technology, science, medicine, other things? Okay, so I'm in good company. So my hope is that this presentation will inspire each and every one of you to become a creator of new information that can go out to the mainstream and create this global awakening with the power of breath. And it may also inspire you to get courageous about learning new things that might intimidate you. I personally am such a passionate advocate for the power of connected breathing. For me, when I first started connected breathing, I had profound experiences of love flooding my body beyond anything I had experienced before. Appearances of angels and guides and ascended masters and teachers and visions for a new earth. And what would really be possible if we united as a species around the cultivation of certain qualities like harmony, empathy, compassion, and understanding. But the thing is, I don't think everyone else maybe has experienced breath work. And do you know people in your life who, even if they're close to you and you're a passionate breath worker, they haven't tried breath work? Yeah, it's amazing. And so I really want to, I hope this presentation inspires you to step up as an outspoken and passionate pioneer and somebody who is taking personal responsibility to be the source of this change. Let's take another deep breath together. So I'm going to just say from the start that I'll be referencing notes because I'll be using some phrases that I learned in my research that are not native to my language and way of speaking. So please be generous when I need to look down at my notes. I would love to just say that my first inspiration in this whole project of creating brain mapping was the music. I heard this gentleman speak today who's presenting about music mastery, and I loved that phrase because for me, music is a universal language. And I know when I lead breathworks, it doesn't matter what language people are speaking, even if I'm speaking a different language, they have a powerful experience. Have you ever done that? Led a breathwork and people not even speaking your language has had a big experience? Yeah, I have too. And so I've gotten really curious, and I'll hand one of these to go out in each direction, just so you can see what we're going to be talking about. I've gotten really curious about how we can create technologies as breathworkers that can move virally across the planet so that people don't actually physically have to show up in the same room as us. And we can breathe with people, yeah, at the same time at exponential levels. And so part of my experiment and my artistry is creating these psychoacoustic tapestries. And essentially, I work with a music producer who's named Ben Templestep, based in Australia. He's also done work in spiritual and shamanic healing. And we take medicine music from around the world, from different traditions, different music for each CD. And then we combine that medicine music with spoken guidance and light language and singing and hypnotic affirmations and binaural theta beats. And the idea is that somebody can breathe with one of these at home and have an experience that has the capacity to trigger the release of dimethyltryptamine from the pineal and pituitary gland. So essentially to have a psychedelic plant medicine-like experience at home. And for the actual journey that we studied in the brain testing, which is going around, it's called I Am Passion, it was inspired by some pilgrimages I made to Peru. I love Peru. I love the traditions there. And over 3 years, I went there quite a few times and worked with some shamans in the Sacred Valley. And if any of you are familiar with them, Puma is my main maestro. And I learned so much about breath and how to breathe to invite in the energies of Pachamama into our bone marrow, into our bones, into our kidneys, into the gallbladder, into the appendix, like literally into every single organ of the body, and how to saturate ourselves with this infinite, abundant energy. And I also learned about how to breathe to connect to the astral realms and how to invite in the energies of the star brotherhoods and the intergalactic sisterhoods of light and all these ascended masters and angelic energies, and how to use visualization and breath in the body to create, I guess in scientific terms, what we call a coherent heart field. How many of you are familiar with the Heart Math Institute? Great. If you're not, check them out, because as breath workers, their scientific findings are gold for us to explain the value and impact of breath work. The Heart Math Institute has done studies that have shown that our heart has the capacity to create a torus field of energy. Does anyone know what a torus field is? Who wants to just tell the group? What's a torus field? Yeah, she's doing the shape. So it's kind of like a donut shape of energy. So while you're even sitting here and I'm talking and you're breathing, just imagine that as you're breathing, you're circulating this donut of energy around you, that you have the capacity to expand or contract depending on how your intention flows, how deep your breath is. And so our torus field can carry distortions and densities based on limiting core beliefs, as you all know this already, on resentments, withheld forgivenesses, and any contractions and traumas that have been kept in our body. And so when we do this breathwork practice with intention and we breathe with the earth and the sky, we're almost doing this what I call shamanic housekeeping. We have the capacity to clean and purify the energy that surrounds our bodies. So this CD that's going around, I Am Passion, I was teaching in Australia at a festival called Byron Spirit Festival. And the theme that year was ancestors. And so I decided I was going to record a live breathwork session with 200 breathers and make this into what this is going around. So I'm going to give you the backstory, because if you're interested in creating audio journeys, I think it's useful for you to get inspired and think about how you can create your audio journeys. So the first thing I did with my producer was we created a preliminary tapestry of rhythm. So he asked me, what is the basic progression you want to create for your journey? And in Breath of Bliss, we have a very specific arc of experience that it begins with something called prayer. So we begin with a space that's kind of opening up the heart and into the crown chakra and just resourcing with the earth and sky. And then it goes into what's called invitation, which means we're beginning to invite the body and the breath to expand more fully. This goes up into passion, which is the most intense period of breathing. out into a place called euphoria, which is where we connect with the sort of solar grid, you know, expanding beyond the planet Earth, and then into a place called love. And so he created just this series of electronic beats that followed this. And then we went into the festival. 200 breathers. And how many of you have been to Byron Bay? Have done any breath work in Byron Bay? Okay. Well, let me tell you in case you go, it's a very cathartic community. So the moment we put on the music, half the room of 200 people already went into catharsis. And so it was a really interesting opportunity for me to use the breath techniques I learned with the shamans in Peru to create a coherent toroidal field. So, and I think all of us as breathwork facilitators would benefit from increasing the resilience of our own field. So no matter how many people you are facilitating, if there is turbulence in the field, that you have the ability to entrain the group back into a harmonic place. So my producer is there, and while this music's playing, he's recording me speaking live, everything, and he's improvising, so he's adding more music. Then after that experience, we go into the studio, we edit out all the catharsis because there's so much screaming in that recording. It was quite a lot of transmutation. And then we added other elements that had spontaneously occurred. Like there's moments where I invite the animal guides in, and so we added like elephants and cougar sounds and eagle cries, and so we just rounded it out. And that is what this recording is. It's the whole live workshop, has the ecstatic dance, the heart share, and the journey. So moving onward to the scientific research. How many of you have ever felt you need to kind of translate breath work and its esoteric elements to something more socially acceptable for more conservative people around you? Okay, me too. Because for me, breathwork is such a psychedelic and spiritual experience, and some might even just, I looked it up on the internet, and it was even classified as a woo-woo practice in some places. And so I have a calling in my body to find ways to make this accessible to more people, and that is what brought me to Dr. Danny, a dear friend of mine who has been based in Bali and has an organization called Zen Brain Lab. She's an integrative medicine doctor at the head of her field, and she primarily works with peak performers, meditators, corporate businessmen, athletes, and other high performers. And what she does with them, she brings them in and puts on this whole headset with little wires, and she calibrates your brain's performance to create data that comes through visually and with numbers. And then she prescribes a series of practices and then tests you again over time to see how is this impacting the brain. Dr. Danny had come to one of my breathworks before, which was why she was even open to this. So while I'm sharing this story, I invite you to even think like, wow, do you know anybody in this kind of field you might be able to collaborate with? Do you know any doctors, psychotherapists, people who are running research of any kind? So anyways, I proposed to her this study, and she was super excited about it. So this was the study. We have this program, the I Am Passion, going around, and I got 3 test subjects together from various backgrounds. I'll tell you more about that in a second. We had them go through the brain testing and then use the program for 10 consecutive days and then do the brain testing again. And I'll share what we found in a moment. So first, about the test subjects. We had 3 subjects. One was a 51-year-old female from Texas who was a social media expert. She had symptoms of emotional contraction, low libido, insecurity, and insomnia. The second person we had was a 36-year-old psychotherapist from Colorado who'd gone on Europa. She was exhibiting signs of anxiousness, somatic disconnection, so she wasn't feeling so connected to her body, and really feeling disconnected from spirit, I guess you could say, her inner resources and higher self. The last subject was a guy. I think he was 32, a physicist from Germany. Very analytical, software programmer, terrible sleep patterns, disconnection from his wife, and an inability to fully articulate emotions and feel all of his senses. So the doctor knew nothing about these symptoms beforehand. I knew about the symptoms. And so she was administering this blind. And so we went through the 10 days. And how did it go? They basically showed up to the lab, and it's Bali, and their heads are not supposed to be sweaty, and there can't be salt. And so we had to go through this whole elaborate thing of like desalting their heads. And I mean, there's so many little details you don't even hear about in these presentations. And then they put the helmets on, and with the little wires, and then they're just lying there in these chairs breathing for about 15 and 20 minutes, and the brains are being measured. And then after that, for the next 10 days, they all gathered and did this breathwork practice. Again, ecstatic dance, heart shares, and journey. At the end of the 10 days, they came together, had the brain mapping again, and then I went in separately, and the doctor reported to me what she found. This is where I need my notes, because there's a lot of large words here. So first of all, I want to say that her overall response was one of surprise. She works with people who do meditation programs for periods of up to 3 months. And she said the results from this single round of 10 consecutive days of breath work by far eclipsed the impact on their brains that people who've been meditating for months had experienced. And by the way, I also have YouTube videos about this, so if you're wanting more details, you'll be able to see it all more later. Did you have a question? Oh, I'm sorry. So she had worked with people who had been doing meditation practices for up to 3 months, and the results from these only 10 days of like an hour and a half every day by far eclipsed the impact on their brains from that. And this is exactly what she discovered using the languaging of brain mapping. The first thing was what's called increased alpha asymmetry. And what is that? That means that your overall mood is elevated. The other thing is it means that there's more mood congruent memory. What that means is, you know how humans have a tendency to remember the harder things and the negative things? Because of this experience, their brains had an increased capacity to remember positive things, which means the overall mood was enhanced. The second brain indicator was decreased brain over arousal. What this means is brain over arousal is associated with anxiety. It's associated with getting caught up in fight, flight, or flee, and adrenaline being released into the system. And we all know adrenaline is one of the most addictive substances on the planet. So this really helped people recalibrate and realign their nervous systems to be in a greater state of responsive harmony. The third impact she found was better brain inner hemispheric connectivity. And what this means is the level of functional connection between the 56 regions of the brain on one side were more connected to those 56 regions on the other. So that means basically better motor function. There was better facial recognition, memory possibilities, higher performance, higher hand-eye coordination, a higher capacity to concentrate, a higher capacity to focus, and greater access to creativity. The fourth impact that she found was increased alpha dominant frequency. And what that means is the alpha frequency is kind of like when you're in an idling state. It's a super relaxed state when you're awake and aware and ready to immediately respond to whatever presents itself into your experience. If you think about animals and nature that are just so present and in their bodies and have the capacity to respond, that's what the alpha frequency is about. And finally, the fifth indicator she found was significant improvement in beta asymmetry. What does that mean? Higher capacity to have attention span, easier communication skills, improvement in the ability to complete cognitive tasks, better problem solving and decision making. And so I'm going to be honest with you. When she was running through all this data with me, I was kind of like a deer in headlights because I am not a scientist or a brain expert. But I was still able to grasp the fundamentals of the impact of this work. And as you can tell, it's having a significant impact on the brain. The things I was able to immediately understand was the actual feedback from the participants. And I'll tell you a little bit about what they said. They reported feeling greater self-acceptance, more happiness, more joy, more ease in their body, greater access to ecstasy, inner child healing, better sleep, better grounding, more embodiment, clarity, freedom, pleasure, and more. So the interesting thing as well was that one of our test subjects, the psychotherapist, discovered even through this process that there were certain imbalances in her brain that were never detected previously, functional imbalances, and this whole process actually started self-regulating those as well. So it just had this added benefit. So let's take a deep breath. I know that's a lot of information for us breath workers. Let's take 3 deep breaths. And so my hope is that hearing about this may inspire you to get curious about stretching beyond your comfort zone and perhaps daring yourself to learn a new technology or to create a collaboration with an expert in a field who may be able to amplify the impact that you're having on your community. So that is pretty much the, the report side of this, this presentation. As far as Breath of Bliss, I can share more later. I see questions, so let's take a few questions. Yeah.
Do you plan to run a control group? So where you might have people still come together, spend that time together, maybe, but not go through the exercises?
Yeah.
And measure them before and after.
I didn't do a control group. I just did the one test group with a doctor. Yeah.
Do you plan to?
Well, unfortunately, she's closed the lab in Bali, and now she's relocated to London. So if any of you are in London and want to pick up the study, then maybe come see me afterwards, and I'll give you her information.
So there's no plans to publish it yet, is there?
She wanted to publish it, but we haven't moved forward yet. Yeah.
Just for the non-believers, it's great.
Yeah. I think it's, and that's the thing, the sort of non-believers. And I personally, Breath of Bliss, just to share a little bit with you, is probably one of the more esoteric breathwork practices out there. We create these angelic ceremonies that invite people to connect primarily with their heart, their higher self, their soul, and source. So we invite fully feeling your emotions as guardians of your higher self. We invite feeling the, the memories, the distortions, whatever may be creating turbulence, but we also sort of invite the awareness to ascend to higher frequencies and possibilities, because we have the capacity to co-create a new earth at this time by becoming more unified as a species and by parenting our attention and helping it mature to a level of inquiry which benefits the whole. I think it's time. I think it's time for breathwork as a whole, as a field, to invite those larger connections to form. And so anyways, with Breath of Bliss, as I was saying, because we're a more esoteric school, I find it's so important to be able to speak in the commonly accepted language of the mainstream and to be able to speak to the most skeptical people you'll encounter. And we do a lot of training in our teacher training on public speaking and how to present in ways that feel coherent to all types of listeners. So, yes.
So what level of technology is required to do brain scanning? Like a university
Yeah.
lab or something you can go buy off the internet?
This is such a great question. You might be able to go buy all the stuff off the internet. This particular facility was created by her as an integrative medical doctor. It was not affiliated with the university, it was independent business organization. I imagine that there are university labs around the whole world and that you might be able to reach out to the largest research organizations around you and just ask. Like, ask what resources they have and research is happening and if they're open to collaboration. Yeah. Any other questions?
Well,
Yeah.
I don't have so much a question, but maybe an offering.
Yeah.
Because in my community, there's a person that just holds breathwork open to the public, free will donation, every Tuesday evening. And people that come from, like, the person that invited me just said, do you want to come to breathwork? I think it's, you just breathe, and I think it's like spiritual or something. So she didn't really say anything to me about it. And then when I experienced it, well, you know, you've all experienced it. And so people have come that you would never suspect, that you wouldn't even begin to talk to, but they're just invited to come and breathe, you know, and then just see how they feel. And that's been an amazing opening for a lot of people that I would have never suspected would be interested. And then they put the word out,
Yeah.
you know, in their own language. So
Yeah, that's how I built my whole Breath of Bliss. Actually, I went to Bali. I was invited to teach at a retreat, and I offered a breath session. And then people just wanted me to stay, and I offered a giant free session. And that's the thing. If I find offering a free session every 6 weeks, open to the public, creates so much exposure for the work and so much goodwill in people to spread the word and get interested. So if you're not already offering one free session on a massive scale, perhaps even collaborating with a yoga studio or health organization near you to get the word out, it's a great idea. Yes?
Yes, you mentioned at the start that the benefits far outweigh meditation. I've been investigating, and I study mindfulness for many years, and I've been investigating the relationship between the two rather than pitting one against the other. And I know that's not what your intention is, but I certainly see the massive value in using meditation as a process to deal with what comes up in breathwork because of the
Oh, yes.
the amount of stuff that comes up that you don't get from meditation. But I really think the study of momentary awareness of the things that happen within breathwork are hugely essential for helping people in recovery.
Yes. Thank you so much. I completely agree. And I have a separate meditation practice. I can't imagine doing one without the other. And I'll just put it on the table. There have been some skeptics of my work because in the past, my breathwork journeys were very intense. This audio that we tested is the most intense breath journey I've ever led in my life, honestly, and it was caught on audio. Things have since become much more blissful and angelic. And when I asked the doctor about this, and I said, is the capacity there to re-traumatize people if it becomes too intense? Like, where is the line drawn? And you know, I was initially trained in clarity, and then I was encouraged by them to go on and create this. As if you were in their workshop, you know their approach is much more nurturing and motherly. Dr. Danny advised me that to access certain psychological material in what she called the basement, in the recesses of our consciousness, sometimes it takes a very large push to shake us out of our habitual breathing patterns, our habitual body movements, and that by building those new neural pathways, by that big push, that can actually free and become bring more material to conscious awareness that was there before. And we have a perfect person with our hand raised because she's a psychotherapist.
Much to share about it, yes, very nice. I wanted to share that for 20-some years I use breathwork. Yeah, yeah. So for 20-some years I use breathwork, conscious connected breathing in outpatient for recovery from addiction. And 2 years ago I had the chance to be in a recovery center and I use it in inpatient.
We can't hear you.
Huh?
We can't hear you.
Okay.
Stand up, stand up.
Okay.
Please stand
So,
up.
for more than 20 years, I use conscious connected breathing in outpatient addiction, recovery from addiction. And 2 years ago, I had the chance to be in a recovery center, and I use it in inpatient. So finally, I had that dream to have a recovery center, a rehab center, and I was invited finally to be there. So I managed to use it, did a session in the client, and the result of that. And since then, I've been around the world with my program, Breathwork for Recovery, because my dream is that beside the 12-step, we will have everybody who go to a rehab center will have at least 10 sessions, and they can take that with them at home. So it's quite, has been a challenge, but it's quite on now in the world because I'm in the world of recovery because I'm already lecturing in different, and last May I had the opportunity to have an experiential workshop with the therapists and doctors, and so we are closer to, and already we have some invitation to go around the world to train the therapists in the rehab center to become breathwork.
Wow.
So it's becoming very popular. But it's amazing that in that field it was not there yet. But we are just three breaths from it.
Thank you so much.
So of course, integrating with other professionals is very, very important. As a psychotherapist and as a breathwork, it's very important to work with doctors, psychologists, psychotherapists, and do our work, joining forces in the work, yes.
Thank you so much. And you also bring up, too, those other organizations. You know, I love that the school work was brought up today, the educational schools. And there's also prisons. We have some Breath of Bliss facilitators who are wanting to bring it into prisons, you know, medical institutions. So, yeah. Yes.
I have a question. So speaking of like, you know, ordinary people that don't know what breathwork is or anything, so what is like a description of breathwork, like something simple that you give when you're talking to somebody like a doctor or, I don't know, whoever, that, what do you say?
About
Say, what is
breathwork in
breathwork?
I generally say breathwork is a gentle and effective way to bring more harmony into the body by open mouth connected breathing where the inhale is connected to the exhale without a pause. Yeah. Keeping it simple. I don't jump into the whole angelic ceremony thing. No, keep the Ascended Masters for later.